everyone, welcome back to QSR Nation, your weekly source of food service marketing and business strategies for success. Here are your hosts, Josh, Beth, Tony, and Grant from the PFS Brands National Headquarters in Holt Summit, Missouri.
Hey everybody, welcome back to QSR Nation. As always, we have Josh, Beth, Grant, and Tony from the PFS Brands National Headquarters in Holt Summit, Missouri to talk about food service marketing and business strategies for success. Today, we finally did it. We got somebody that's always around here at the PFS Brands National Headquarters to be on the podcast, and that's Mark Gandy.
We snatched him away, technically.
Yeah. He's the owner of G3CFO.com, a small business consulting practice. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much. That's going to be hard to live up to.
Now, Mark, can you kind of just tell us a little bit about your background?
I'm a recovering accountant.
Snaps for Mark, then. There you go.
Exactly. So did the accounting thing back in Truman University in Missouri. First job at a college, KPMG, Pete Marwick. So did the accounting thing. Worked at a really fun family-owned business in North Central Missouri for about 10 plus years. Started my own practice in 2001, and a lot of the work I do is helping small business owners who need a CFO, can't afford a full-time CFO, so I jump in. But I also help not just with the CFO part. There's three parts to every business. There's marketing, there's sales, and there's operations. So finance is just a support part of the function. HR is support, legal support. So once you figure out the marketing, the sales, and the operations, hopefully we can start getting some traction. But my background is in finance.
Nice.
Boring. Awesome. Is
No, that's a very important part of any business.
Exactly.
So, anything we could all take from. So I know that you are really big into knowing the strengths and weaknesses of yourself and your clients and all their employees as well. Why is that so important?
You know, I got the questions ahead of time. And so again, one of the questions is talking about what you said, the strengths and weaknesses. And I thought, man, that's not an easy question, right? Because you can have an easy, quick answer for that. But I got to thinking, one of my kids have an index card. So one of my kids recommended the book, The Boys in the Boat. Loved it. It's 1930, whatever year that we went to the Olympics. It was pre-World War II Olympics. It might have been 36, the Jesse Owens Olympics. So you had this rowing team up in Washington, and I believe the rowing teams have eight rowers, I believe. So what I loved about that book is 8 rowers. You'd think they'd just be plug and play, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not correct. Because the people in the back of the boat are a little bit stronger. The people up in the front near the stern, they're not as big. But everyone still need to have that proper cadence in order to win. And so as I got to thinking about your question, which is easy to gloss over, I thought, in small business, usually the goal is get them hired, mm-hmm. And then we'll worry about getting them in the right seat later. But to me, when I think about that whole rowing analogy, it's so important to get the right people in the right position, because if not, it's going to be problematic. Now, in a grocery store, in a C-store, how important is that? I mean, that could probably be debated, but I still think it's important to try to figure out how can we get this person's unique gifts and talents into the right role that will help the business to grow and thrive.
And that's a great point, because if someone is a natural, outspoken person, and they're that extrovert, having them to be a great point of contact with the customer could be really good for engagement and asking people to try new things, for upsells, etc. Whereas if they're more introvert, not saying that they shouldn't maybe build on that skill set and actually still do that position, but if they feel they can really blossom more with maybe inventory management and checking in stuff and receiving and dealing with a smaller group of folks, you can actually really benefit from that, from playing off of those strengths, and both those people feel good about building on what they know they're good at and what they're comfortable with.
And I think one thing that you spoke about in the huddle a couple weeks ago was something very important is that you shouldn't necessarily focus on your weaknesses. Yes, everyone has them, but you need to focus on your strengths because everyone's going to have those weaknesses and you can understand what you can do to try and develop those further so that we get better. But really focus in and hone in on those strengths so that we get better and better and better. And that's what you can actually always contribute to the table and to whatever teamwork that you do have.
I know some of us here around this table like baseball.
Yeah.
Well, Grant pretends he likes baseball. He's a Royals fan. He's not like it's like real
I
baseball.
like it very much.
But,
not like a Cardinal fan or anything.
But Babe Ruth is in the Hall of Fame because he hits home runs. Ozzie Smith, if you don't know the name, he's in the Hall of Fame because he has a good glove. Lou Brock is in the Hall of Fame because he can steal bases. And so if you had asked Lou Brock to be a home run hitter, he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame. So again, like you said, Beth, focusing on the strengths, and so they were able to propel their teams. All of those players were on championship teams at one time. So it's a great question.
That analogy is really good too. It actually reminds me of dog sled teams too.
Exactly.
Because
Yep.
I don't remember the details, but I think like every row of dogs has a different job, whatever,
Absolutely.
a different strength. So
It's really deep,
was.
Grant. Wow.
Wow.
Dang.
And we're going to pause for a moment
Yeah.
and just awe.
Everyone just reflect.
Okay, time out. Is there a backstory here?
No, he just happens to know little quirky things.
Way to go, Grant. Insert slow clap.
So you have the, one of the things you brought to us was the Colby strength, test, and there was all these different components to it. Why do you think that is such an important piece for ownership and leaders to have staff take that?
First, do we need to define what the Colby?
Yeah, that'd probably be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nobody better than you to define that for sure.
First of all, I'm not an expert at it. I'm a passionate curiosity.
By the way, I'd like to interject. He's also probably the most humble person in the entire world.
Exactly.
Well, I want to say back in 2003 to 2004, I was at an event hosted by Gary Boomer. Gary is like one of the most respected accountants for the last umpteen years in the industry, and he kept mentioning Colby. I'm thinking, is that some kind of a cheese or something? But once I learned about the assessment, I got around to taking it 4 years later. So I really had to, because I'm very skeptical of stuff like that. So I took the assessment. I thought, this is very, very fascinating. But I really didn't do a lot with it. And by the way, I'll get to the what of it in just a second. But then I got to spending more time mentoring and coaching other people. So I really wanted to get better at being able to be a better coach. So I revisited Colby, and the reason I put a lot of focus into it is because I'm going to use the term quick start. Again, we'll define that in just a minute. A quick start, you usually want to start on the last page, get to the point, bullet points. I'm a fact finder, very, as Kathy would say, long in the tooth fact finder. So we like our research, facts, information, well done. We want that last piece of information. We love answers. We don't stop until we're done. But with a quick start, I usually start on the last page, bullet points, and that's how our founder, Sean, is a quick start. So once I started digging deep into the Colby, the whole cognitive mindset, it helped me really to be a better coach, a better listener, and helped me to quit focusing on me and focus on the other person more. So what Colby is it's not a personality profile. Everyone's taken one in school, maybe a past job, like DISC is one, Myers-Briggs, if I said that correctly, the Myers-Briggs indicator, type A indicator, something indicator. There are several others, but Colby is not that. It measures how you go about doing your work when you're in striving mode. So Beth, when you come to the office every day, let's say you're throwing a brand new project. Mm-hmm. So you're either going to look things up, you may need to do some research. On the other hand, you may not. So there is no good or bad. You're either a fact finder or you may not need a lot of information to go forward. Some people, has Jim Spratt ever been on your show?
Yeah,
Yes,
yes,
yes.
If you knew nothing about Colby, the guy is, how many times did he say the word process? I mean, someone ought to, process.
Yeah.
And I can almost impersonate him. When this show's over, I'll give my.
Or you could do it now, we'll embarrass you later. So, I mean,
But
Please let me record it.
He is so systems, process, he can't even help it. And it's not necessarily a cognitive thing, it's just that's what he does. If he needs to figure out a project, he's going to develop the system. And then quick starts, they're so predictable. They have ideas, all kinds of ideas. They're also very manipulative. So if you ever want Sean, our founder, to do something, just tell him it's impossible.
Write that down.
And then there are implementers. Implementers are very tactile. They like work with their hands. So the reason, I think, getting back to the original question, hope that wasn't too long.
No, it's perfect.
But the reason for me, Colby, is useful and insightful, I think especially in knowledge positions, some positions require one or more of those traits. So if you get someone in the wrong role from a cognitive standpoint, there's going to be stress. There might be some strain, and that's what you want to try to eliminate. So if I can't remember what your profile is, Beth, you may have to jump.
I was actually, they didn't have an answer for me at the
Oh,
time.
at the time.
Yes.
And that's understandable. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
So do you remember your numbers, Grant?
I don't remember my numbers, but I do remember that I was not a quick start. So would that mean I'm
yeah,
the
that's
opposite?
not, that's obvious. Sorry.
So for example, I don't like to refer to my numbers, but I have an 8822. So if I'm taking on a brand new project, I'm going to do my homework. I do read a lot already, so that helps. In fact, I will call people. I will call people around the United States just to get an answer for something. I'm a follow-through, so if you ever read any of my writings, you'll see lots of frameworks. There's always the system. I tend to be a little overly bureaucratic, but I notice that in me, so when I build systems, I try to build some guardrails to where people don't have to be so follow the process exactly this way. So if you were to put me in a position where I didn't get to use those traits or I had to be a quick start, again, it's going to lead to stress. So I think getting back to your original question, Josh, the key is, can you get those Colby traits into the role where they match up? And then you're going to have some success. I think you asked that.
Yeah, and that's, I think, really key. I know that's one of the things that I guess we're going to be having them actually set up on our doors so that they kind of maximize that. But I think it's really good because focusing on the strengths, I think is really key for a couple of things. One, everyone likes to win, and if you're focusing on your strengths, you're going to, I think, honestly, you're going to win more often, and you're going to win early on. So that helps build confidence, it helps build success, and it continues the ball rolling. Now you can look back and say, okay, now you got to work on this along the way, but if you need to win, your strength is going to be there to help you get there, whether it's completing a task, moving forward with the research, maybe it's just checking the box so that you've got that so you can move forward to the next stage. I think knowing your strength and then also knowing your team strengths help you move those wins along more frequently.
I think that's a huge point for teamwork, just knowing who you're working with. Like my manager and I, she is very much fact finder and doing her research and everything, and I'm just ready to go get started. So we clash like that, and I knew that before we even did the Colby. Then once we did that, we both realized, yeah, that's why. But we created processes and things like that to work together better. So
Absolutely. And one thing, has Trevor been on your show?
long time ago
Yeah,
as well.
long
He was
time
one of the top, probably first 20 episodes, probably.
Yeah.
So we're dropping a name, Trevor. You're Trevor Monig, your CFO. Great, a wonderful guy. Just
Horrible
super.
golfer.
So Trevor and I, one of the terms that we'll use a lot is Colby awareness. And I think one thing that can also occur is I had a prior career, I don't like to admit it. I have a writing background. I used to work in broadcast journalism, so I used to write lots of news stories in a radio environment, and it was very stressful for me. Now in my station, I wrote more news stories than anybody. Well, that was my drive. I competed. I always wanted to be the winner. So I wrote more stories, sometimes up to 10 times more stories than anybody else. I would even work at home just because I wanted to win. But again, I'm a fact finder. So I was placed in a quick start scenario because in radio you have deadlines every hour. So you have to be, and it was frustrating. Whereas say like in a magazine, your deadlines could be months. And if you're working maybe on a long-term project, your deadline could be 6 months out. So you could be an attorney, a trial lawyer. It's probably going to be a quick start. He or she is going to just be painfully bored. They have to do research, all day. So just because you are a marketing person doesn't mean you're going to thrive in a certain role. That position is going to have some type of a Colby, an ideal Colby role for whatever that work is.
So I do have a question. So how often, because I know at that time I was interviewing for a different position than I'm in now, so how often should you take those types of tests? Because obviously you're going to transition in and out of different positions or fields or anything like that.
That is a great question.
You didn't have to pay me to ask that question.
It's an excellent question because I think there's a misconception. So if your score comes back and says, I'm in transition, it just means that there's a little bit of conflict maybe in some of your answers. So you as a person are never in transition. Now, God forbid you're ever in maybe an auto accident and your brain is scrambled a little bit, but you will never, you're going to be the same person. This score is pretty much factory installed at the beginning. So something occurred, Beth, when you took that assessment. Maybe you sensed or felt that, well, I think this role requires me to be this, so I'm going to answer this way, but so you only need to take it once. I have taken it twice out of curiosity. One digit change. So my original score is 8822. My second score came back 8722. I didn't even remember the question, so you only need to take it one time.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question.
That's great because mine said it was perfect.
I'm
so excited.
Mine was perfect too.
That's because we transition as well.
Yeah,
actually.
That's why Josh and I work well together.
Yeah, that's why Grant and I have the same birthday, so we're both perfect.
So I want to make an offer. My offer is in your show notes or whatever, or you can do this on LinkedIn, but maybe the first three listeners who are interested in the Colby, it's called the Colby A Index.
You want to spell that for him too?
Oh, good, thank you. Yes, Kolbe. So the first three people that reach out to you, either in, it can be, I guess, Twitter, email, or you all set the
Facebook,
rules.
anything, yeah.
The first three people will need your first name, last name, and email address, and then we'll get that link out to you.
That's awesome.
Because otherwise, the retail price, I believe, is $49.95. So yeah.
Oh, cool.
So
Definitely
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Definitely interested to do that.
First three people.
Well, I'll tell you
First three
that
people.
if you're in a position of leadership, definitely sign up and get it done because you need to make sure you know yourself. Before you can coach other people and help build them up, you need to make sure you are in your own right process and where you're at. So definitely take advantage of Mark's offer there for sure. And I want to say real quick also kind of transition out of that. So once you kind of know that, where your team is and you're ready to kind of build forward, and that's where really some great financial literacy education can come into play there and begin to help those folks build it on themselves and their strengths even further. Would you agree?
Definitely, absolutely. And I suppose you want me to keep. So I know we use the term financial literacy a lot. I think one of your all's board members, she uses the term business literacy a lot, and I appreciate that because that's kind of where my head is. I mentioned earlier there are really three parts of the business. Now, once you're past, I'm assuming let's just say once you're past startup. I don't know if we have any startup companies listening. So once you're beyond the startup phase, once you've got a proven, validated product and a customer base, there's really only three parts of the business, right? So there's marketing, there's selling, and then there's your operations. It's your that's where the magic takes place. So what I do is, it doesn't matter who it is, we'll start with the marketing. So who is our customer? What's the story? How many people do we need to be trying to bring in to get converted into sales? And then once we do the sales thing, what do we need to be doing? So once we figure that out, what are the 2 or 3 key activities under each of those? Now, in a small business, it's pretty simple. You all have a complex, there's a lot of moving parts in your business. But for smaller businesses that maybe owns let's say 7, 8 grocery stores, I mean, there's only 2 or 3 key activities in their marketing. You used to sell newspaper space, and the big piece of their marketing was probably that insert on a weekly or daily basis.
Sure.
And then the sales part, let's say you're B2B, maybe we have some consulting firms. The sales part is really critical. So I just start there. I look at what are the key activities, and then under each of those pieces of work, what are the key numbers that lead to success? And then we'll ultimately start talking about, okay, how does this all funnel into the financial statements? So I like to try to model it out first. That's that follow through, Colby and me, that wants to, here's the value chain in your business, and then how does that all flow into, say, like an income statement? And then we start getting to the financial literacy. But once you understand the business model, to me the business model is, here's how we make money. Here's how we make money. So money comes in, money goes out. Once I understand that model, then I can start, here's where those dollars hit the income statement. And so that's how my approach is at looking at financial literacy.
Well, I think it's really key because so many employees, they don't have the business literacy. They know that they're showing up for work, they're earning a paycheck, they understand what their function is and their role is, but maybe they don't understand the impact that their individual job has on the business as a whole. Or there's a misconception that, well, Grant owns the company, so therefore he's taking home all the money, and you get that different level of expectation going there as far as valuation of what my contribution as a team member actually is. And I think that's so key that, like you said, know the model, understand how it functions, but also getting into and not being afraid to share that information with your team members, because you might be really surprised at how much, once someone gets it, they can propel your business and themselves.
Go ahead.
Well, as you're talking, I was thinking about one of the grocery stores I will pop into. I'm not going to say their names. We'll just say it's in rural Missouri. It's not Walmart. It's not Hy-Vee. It's one of the smaller chains. But I'll walk in there and there'll be these high school kids kind of huddled together. And I'm just thinking, why aren't you finding something to do? But they're there chatting. And I wonder, have they been taught, here's how this business makes money? It doesn't make money. You just standing there with a broom in your hand, just congregating, doing nothing. Now, we've all been there. I'm not trying to, but I think the point is, if everyone understands this is how this store makes dollars, by the way, the better I do, I'm more likely to keep my job, the next week.
Yeah.
So we're talking job security if I understand how my role plays out.
Absolutely. I mean, so we've talked before, I think, on the show about how I have a big whiteboard at my house, and my kids understand where every dollar comes in, where every dollar goes out. They help, even talk about, well, should we cut this service out? Should we do this different? And they're very engaged in the finances, except my 12-year-old. She just give me cash. But, pretty much everybody else is really engaged with it. And a friend of mine runs a retail clothing store. My 6-year-old went to work for her, and she said she was so impressed because she has such a problem with high schoolers. It takes 3 of them to hang a shirt up. When she got there, she was like, I don't need your help. You need to be taking care of that customer. You need to be doing this. And started kind of dictating out what needs to be done. She goes, we've got to do this. We've got to make sure this stuff gets out, because if we don't buy it, we don't have hours, okay? And I need my money, so we need to get this stuff moving. She was connecting the dots even at 16. So don't be afraid to take the moment and explain that business model to even a high schooler. because it's amazing what can motivate them, and money really works sometimes. They start to equate, well, if this sells, I get more hours. They feel good about themselves because they're helping achieve goals. So there's so much that can be beneficial to not just them as individuals, but to your store. I mean, that store actually wound up being the #1 store in their chain for several months there, and a lot of that contributed to the fact that, I mean, they had a great manager. She was great, but she was actually being able to take and explain the business to the employees, adults or high schoolers, and they were responding. The ones that didn't respond found new jobs, but the ones that did respond, they found enjoyment in what they were doing. So I think that's a really key takeaway for that opportunity.
That's definitely a very good example. Now, Mark, I kind of want to circle back to the Colby and the strengths and weaknesses. And one thing I've always been fascinated with is, how a lot of successful CEOs, they always say that when they make decisions, they make them quick, and they're slow to change the course after making these decisions. Now, is that true, and why is making timely decisions so important? It's a loaded question. I know. I've always found the topic fascinating.
I'm stalling, and I will have a great answer.
Do you want to tell us a joke first? And then
I'll have a great answer next Tuesday. Grant, what do you think of that?
Well, go ahead.
I think if you're on a sinking ship like the Titanic, you need some quick decisions. I think it depends. I think it's contextual. I think it depends on the situation. I have this morning. I'm one of my clients I meet every Tuesday morning, and he is very long in the tooth fact finder, and he'll be the first to tell you that it takes sometimes time to make decisions. He's also one of my profitable. If you look at the bottom line, of his company, and take that compared to sales, it's like over 30%.
Nice.
And he is probably my highest performing, and sometimes decisions are slow. So I think for every example you hear people making quick, fast, decisive decisions, which by the way I like being around people who are very decisive. They can make a decision quickly. But I also know people who sometimes it takes a while, takes slower time to make decisions.
But I think
Well,
that's
maybe
why.
that's
Sorry.
okay. So maybe that's the point, is that being decisive about once you make that decision and stay in the course. That can
Yes. Yeah, as opposed to, one thing I don't like is people who waffle and they can't. I mean, now we're getting into setting priorities and staying the course. So maybe two different things.
Right.
So some people can make decisions a lot faster, but then I think the other thing is, can you stick to that decision? And I have worked with people, I actually have let them go as clients because they kept, we'll try this, no, let's try this, and that drives me crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, make a decision, let's see this thing through. And I'm not saying they're going to fail, but I think there's going to be a little bit different results if you just stick to the plan. Let's write this thing out.
Yeah, once you decide on something, just be 100% confident in it and stay the course. Basically.
But I think that's also why you build those teams out. So with our leadership team, we have a good group of quick starters, and then you have a good group of the fact finders, and you have to have that balance. So that way, you're going to have some push and pull, but that's what makes good decisions come out of that, because you're going to have those ones that, let's come up with the decision, we got that. But when you have those fact finders, those are the ones that are going to be able to kind of hone in on, this is the right decision, here's your direction, but this is the right decision that we can go, and it'll eventually make everyone happy in that one.
And again, it's a very good question. In fact, it's a really good question. If you can maybe look at some of the decisions you're making, is this a decision that's going to impact us over the next 3 months, or is this a decision that could impact us over the next 10 years? So you take Ford, Chrysler, GM, some of those auto producers, they're making decisions maybe not as true as today, because you can design a lot faster, the lead times are a lot shorter. But you take an organization that makes stuff, it's going to be, some of those decisions are going to have an impact over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, because they can't just change a model over real quickly. So I think your question is important, but I would also look at what's the time period the decision impacts us. If it's shorter, it's like, you can kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
But some of those that have a longer term impact, yeah, there can't be a lot of waffling back and forth.
I think to that point as well, even if you're not doing a product, say you're using another company's service to help you with something you're lacking on, it's important to actually stick with it long enough to have the data points to realize if it's successful or not at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
And I think a lot of times companies will feel that something isn't moving or feel that maybe it is and make continued adjustments based on that versus actually getting true numbers, true data points, like Josh said, to say, okay, this is actually moving the needle, or this is the results of this decision, and then reassessing to either move forward or change direction. So I think, a lot of this conversation, it all comes down to data, and knowing, who you are, who your team is, and then also, transition that into learning who your customer is and how that's going to drive your business forward. To have a business that's highly, has good cash flow, and they've got money coming in and everything, versus a company that maybe just has great sales, but they're not profitable at all. It all depends on how they're looking at that, and a lot of it can be dependent upon that team from top down driving, who's pushing money to the bottom line and volume out the door, but at the same time protecting the business for long-term growth.
Yeah.
Josh and I went to a conference a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about every company has access to all the data in the world that you want. And that data is invaluable. You have to have it. But you have to understand what that data is and how you're going to tell your story, and what's the story that's going to help you prove your ROI. And that's what's going to base your success on that one. So you could have all the data, but if you're just using it just to use it, and you're going to put every little different, well, this data proves that this is not successful, this one's not. But if it's not telling your story, then you're never going to be happy with any solution that you try and come up with. So.
That's a great point. Now, Mark,
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we've talked about several good business practices here with financial literacy and making timely decisions, but is there any other best business practices that you've seen with some of your clients?
Loaded question
Yeah.
there.
Okay, be more specific. Again, that's a good question, because every business is unique. Even if you have two C stores on two different opposite corners, there's going to be some uniqueness there. One of my favorite books is called The Effective Executive. I think it was written in 1964, thereabouts. It's not going to be a book that you read fast, but it's one of the best business books ever been written. And some of especially in the first 3 or 4 chapters, it's like this could have been written yesterday or a year ago, 2 years ago. If you get the book, do not skip the introduction, because in the introduction, Peter Drucker says, here are some of the traits, attributes of a great CEO. And I'm going to get to your question. The first bullet point, he says, with the first trait, or the first thing that an effective executive does. Notice, by the way, he doesn't say efficient, effective. There's a big difference. The effective executive always asks, what needs to be done? So going back to the 3 parts of a business: marketing, selling, operations. And again, you got the support functions. What needs to be done? So there are going to be some things that maybe something's not working. So to me, the best business practice is the one where something's not right. It's not going out and finding, hey, this is the management technique of the day, or this is what everyone's talking about. Who cares what maybe great authors are telling us? In your business right now, what needs to be done? Now, if you need to go and get help on something like digital marketing, I mean, that's to me, that's over my pay grade. It's over my head. That's abstract to me. But if you can answer that question, to me, that is the best management practice, because then you're going to start finding problems. You're going to start finding opportunities. So again, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but to me, that's the oldest business practice in the book, is really identifying what needs to be worked on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, each business has to figure out what the best practice is.
And if I can make one more point, is I don't think the CEO is going to have to deal with, this is not going to be an issue with the CEO, but one issue, it's easy for all of us. We serve in different parts of the business, so we're very hidden away in the deepest catacombs of whatever part of the business we work in.
We got windows now, actually.
Yeah.
Good point.
So exciting.
But whatever it is that you need to work on that needs to be done, you need to make sure that what you're doing doesn't impact the whole, the system. Because think of the business as the system. It's your department is not the system. Jim Spratt's department is not the system. It's just a piece. So whatever it is that he's working on, again, you got to make sure that you're not having unintended consequences when you're answering that question of what needs to be done.
Right. Yep.
Well, that's great. A lot of that sounds like the principles from like Scrum. Make sure everybody knows everything going on and everything like that. So,
Good point.
Yeah,
Great
that's
point.
solid advice.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a couple questions we like to ask everyone at the end of podcasts. So what's a marketing or a business trend that you see for the next year going forward that's going to be probably one of the most popular and most impactful?
Again, I prepped for this question because I needed to. I am not a good forecaster of the future. I mean, some people are good at just really spotting trends. Since I thought the context for this question is maybe marketing, one thing I've noticed, there's two things I've noticed, and I hope I'm not getting off track. From a marketing standpoint, if you look at the data, it's pretty strong that more people are exiting Facebook, more people are using Instagram. Am I right? Is that?
Yeah.
And do you see any advertising trends related to that? I just have a feeling, again, I have no data, this is all anecdotal, and I'm looking at Beth as I'm answering this, but I think one of the trends is going to be that is Facebook going to be, I don't think Facebook's going to go away for a long time, but I don't know if it's going to be as influential as it was, say, maybe 3 years ago. Again, I could be wrong.
Well, I think it truly depends on the business type at this moment as to what's going to be working for them. And Instagram it's very powerful depending on the business type that you are kind of in that direction that you're wanting to go towards. But Facebook is so informational, so in the moment right there that like you said, it's not going away anytime soon because it's so informational based, and just you can change your marketing methods and your advertising at a moment's notice to make sure that you're agreeing with the public.
And the great targeting capabilities helps a lot
Yes.
with Facebook.
Yeah, and it depends on your product too. If you have a very eye-catching product, it works on Instagram
Yeah,
because
food,
it's
yeah,
very
things like
food
that.
especially.
Yes.
So.
No, I think that's spot on too. So.
I have an interest in retail, and one of the articles I read, it mentioned 88 stores that have shut down, gone bankrupt in the last 15, 16 years. I mean, not 10, not 80 some, but I wanted to do some research on, okay, who is succeeding? And so I found an interesting article of who are the retailers that are succeeding. And guess what? There's a common denominator. Dollar General, Family Dollar, and then some of these other discounters. Dollar General in my neck of the woods, they've added 2 new units.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So there's something maybe to be said about discount stores. So I know retail is not dead. It just depends on what part of retail that you're in.
And the value consumer segment is definitely growing, and your grocery stores are continually speaking to that segment heavily. I think that's where Dollar General is winning. They'll go where other big boxes won't, and still be able to provide that value. And there's we could do probably a whole podcast just on Dollar General because they've got a very smart business plan, the way they go about it. But that's a great assessment to see. That movement towards there is very, very high. Now you mentioned earlier the effective executive. What if you could recommend one other business or marketing book? What would it be? So what's the have to read?
Well, I want to interject first because this guy is an avid reader. He reads dozens and dozens of books. And what you said at Huddle, he spent $3,000 at least a year on books.
That's right, in a low year.
Yeah, so like this, he reads a lot. So.
I prepared for the question, and again, I think the context were marketing books, were they?
Or business or marketing?
Business marketing.
So I went the marketing route, so I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think any business person is going to value. I didn't do one, I did 3.
Okay.
And by the way, there's a why, and I'll try to go fast here, but I do coach and mentor other consultants around the country, and one of the books I have them to read just to get started with marketing. So to me, I think I've mentioned this before, marketing is a two-sided coin. So one side you get the magic, and the other side you get the logic. So I like the magic part of marketing. And so one of the books I recommend, now Beth, you may smirk at it, you may think it's not that great, but it's a book that gets a business person to start thinking about the customer instead of yourself. It's called The Brain Audit by Sean D'Souza. The Brain Audit. I don't know if the word "the" is in front. I don't know if it's Brain Audit or The Brain Audit. Brilliant little book, recommended to a lot of even small business owners, because if I feel like they don't understand marketing, it really gets to the basics. You know, who's the customer? You know, what's the problem? So it hits all those basics before you even start your tactics. The other book I highly recommend, even I don't care if you're the CEO, I don't care if you're a departmental manager, it's effective in marketing. It's good if you're not a marketer, but it's influence. I have a feeling you've maybe read it, Josh,
Who's
by
that
Robert Cialdini.
I don't know.
And the book's called Influence, and outstanding. It addresses 6 universal principles that lead to persuasion. It's a book about persuasion, and these are principles that are not manipulative. You could use them for manipulation. For example, the law of reciprocity.
Yeah.
But when I do something nice for someone, what do you want to do automatically? You want to
Return the
reciprocate.
favor.
Yeah.
And then the other book, I'm reading it. I read it once a year, and because I like to write. I'm not great at it, but I read the book Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. I think Sean, our founder, has read that book, but I read it annually. I usually listen to it annually as well. But
Yeah,
I think in the marketing space, it's really good. I think Brain Audit and Made to Stick are really 2 good complementary books, and it's a book about persuasion as well. So those are my 3 picks, at least for today.
For today. Until you read the next one.
Yeah.
Awesome, got some reading material now.
Yeah, and then last question we have. This is a very much loaded question. One piece of advice you'd offer a new entrepreneur or someone looking to getting into business or retail business.
I've thought about this question. There are probably 5, 6, 7 different ways to answer the question. And I don't want to get too deep here, but one question I would have is, have they ever done business before? Has parents been in the business? Right. Let's assume, for your question, there's no background whatsoever. I think one of the first things I would do is let them know that this is going to be, it could be rewarding. It's going to be very, very hard. There's a book I read this past year, and I keep replacing these books every year with a different one. The people who created Banana Republic, you ever shop there? So it's a husband-wife team that created that company. And they have a little book, I think it's called Wild Company. And it's basically their journey of how they got started. I think they were journalists. I think they were writers. And not all was well in the beginning. And then things started going well, and then they got the proverbial big check. They got bought out. And my advice would be read a couple of books of people who've been there. Derek Sivers created a company called CD Baby. One of my favorite little books. Same thing. He started this little business, and just to help other people out, other artists. And everything he could do wrong, it did go wrong. He ended up selling his business, did well. I would start with, if you're a reader, find a couple of books of people who've done it and failed. We need stories about failure. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me the success stories. I want to hear stories of failure. But by the way, these people ended up succeeding. If you don't like to read, go find a couple of people that have done this. Go seek out a Sean. You've got a couple of business, I think, on the site. You reach out to people who have started a business. Find out, when did you want to quit? Find out the things that worked, didn't work. I would just ask questions before you jump in.
It's great advice.
Is that?
No, that's
Yeah, yeah.
That's great
That's
advice.
the
Finding that peer
realist.
group. Yeah, finding the peer group that you can go and you
Yeah.
can communicate with and understand that nervousness or that excitement is perfectly normal or whatever it is whenever you're coming into a business.
But also the realization of the expectation from the hard work, the long hours, the defeats, the losses, but also understanding the ability to get back up is always still there.
Yep.
You know, I think that, understand you're going to get knocked down a lot, and just being, I guess I want to say okay with it, but knowing that's just part of the journey.
And learning from it.
And learning from it. Yeah, I mean, don't just stand back up. Figure out why you fell, and then be able to get back.
Kind of like becoming an overnight success in 10 years.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those first few years will be hard, and I keep mentioning marketing, selling, and operations. Well, guess who's in charge of marketing usually? The founder. Who's usually the best salesperson, the rainmaker of the company? It's the founder. Who's making things work in the back office? Who's working late at night on holidays? So those first 2 to 3 years are so hard. Once the money starts coming in, you can start getting a dedicated marketing person, another sales team member, and then so on. You've had Brock on the show, someone who's really good with operations. But like I said, those first few years really hard because you're doing everything.
Yeah.
You guys got anything else for Mark?
No, it was a great conversation. Appreciate you being able to come in today.
I just hope your ratings don't take a
I do want to mention you can find Mark at g3cfo.com, and also if you're curious, he dropped like 6 books on us today. If you're curious about what he's reading and what he's doing right now, check out cfobookshelf.com and subscribe to that because he has a weekly newsletter, which I'm part of, and this guy reads a lot, writes a lot, listens to a lot, and he describes all that, and there's some really good pieces of advice in there.
And a reminder about the comment.
For the Colby test.
Yeah.
Yep. So reach out to us as well. You can comment or reach out to us. In the first 3, we'll get you started with the Colby.
Yeah.
So.
Exciting stuff.
Yep. Once again, thanks, Mark. Appreciate
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, for all our listeners, for Josh, Beth, Grant, and Tony, we'll talk to you next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Champs Chicken. For deals, discounts, and updates, check out champschicken.com/connect. Be sure to stop by next week for another episode of QSR Nation, and be sure to check us out online at pfsbrands.com/podcast.